"You don't have the authority to lock this." That was the first thing she shouted, before I'd even stepped out of my truck. Her voice carried across the water, sharp and rehearsed, the kind of confidence people use when they're absolutely sure the crowd is on their side. Behind her, a dozen strangers lounged along the shoreline. Coolers open, music playing, fishing lines already in the water. On my land. I stayed in the driver's seat longer than I needed to, watching the scene through the windshield. Smoke drifted lazily upward from a portable grill. Laughter echoed between the trees. Someone cracked open another beer like this place belonged to them. 3 hours earlier, this lake had been empty. I hadn't even lived here a month. I stepped out, phone already recording, not because I planned to make a scene, but because I've learned something important in my life. When someone acts this entitled, they usually plan to rewrite the story later. "Excuse me," I called, keeping my voice calm. "This is private property. Everyone needs to leave." The music didn't stop. A few heads turned. Most didn't. That's when she finally faced me. Karen Morrison, HOA president, early 50s, perfect posture, tight smile, clipboard tucked against her chest like a shield. "Oh, good," she said loudly, performing for the group. "You're back. We were waiting for you." Waiting. Like I was the one intruding. "This lake," she continued, sweeping a manicured hand toward the water, "is a shared community resource. You don't get to block access because you feel like it." I felt something click into place then. Not anger, not fear, but clarity. Because she wasn't bluffing. She truly believed that. "I'm going to say this once," I replied. "This lake sits entirely on my deeded land. You're trespassing." She laughed. Actually laughed. People around her smiled, relieved, like the villain had finally revealed himself. "That's not how it works," she said. "Residents have used this lake for years, long before you showed up." I zoomed the camera slightly. "Then you won't mind showing me the document that gives you legal access." Her smile faltered for half a second. "We don't need to show you anything," she said. "It's on file." "Perfect," I answered. "Until I see it, everyone needs to pack up." That's when the tone shifted. A man near the grill stepped forward. "Come on, man. Don't ruin a family day." I met his eyes. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm stopping it." Karen's voice hardened. "You're harassing HOA members. I'm calling the police." I almost smiled. "Please do." 20 minutes later, the patrol car rolled in. Lights off. Casual. The deputy stepped out and stopped short when he saw me. "Didn't expect to see you back here," he said. We'd known each other since high school. Karen launched into her version immediately. Hostile neighbor, blocking access, threatening families. When it was my turn, I handed the deputy my phone. "This property has been privately owned since the 1940s. No easements, no shared access. Here's the recorded deed." The deputy scanned it, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, do you have paperwork showing HOA rights to this lake?" Her face flushed. "It exists," she snapped. "Just not on me." "That's not good enough," he said. "Everyone needs to leave." The crowd packed up slowly, resentment thick in the air. Karen lingered, staring at me like this wasn't over. "You just made an enemy," she said quietly. "An entire community." I met her gaze. "Then you shouldn't have picked land you don't own." That night, I locked the gate my grandfather had installed 60 years earlier. And for the first time since inheriting this place, I wondered why Karen Morrison had been so confident, so sure that the truth would bend Fawan or her. That question wouldn't let me sleep. And by Monday morning, I'd discover the answer. By Sunday morning, the neighborhood already hated me. I knew that before I even opened my front door. Cars slowed as they passed my driveway, not stopping, just creeping, windows down, heads turning. One woman lifted her phone and snapped a photo like I was some kind of criminal landmark. I hadn't said a word to anyone since Karen's party was shut down. She had. The proof came taped to my door. No stamp, no return address. Just my name written in thick, aggressive strokes. Inside was a single page on HOA letterhead. Notice of violation, denial of community access rights. Immediate compliance required or legal action will be pursued. Signed, Karen Morrison, HOA President. I read it twice, then laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed something important. She wasn't backing down. She was escalating. I made coffee and sat on the porch, watching the lake glow gold as the sun rose. My grandfather used to say that when people panic, they stop hiding their tracks. Karen was panicking. At 10 a.m., I walked to the mailbox. That's when Gerald, 2 houses down, cleared his throat behind me. "Look," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "I don't want trouble. But you should know. Karen sent a message to the whole neighborhood last night." I felt my jaw tighten. "What kind of message?" He sighed. "That you threatened families, called the police on kids fishing, that you're trying to steal community property." There it was. The narrative. By the time I got back inside, my phone was buzzing. Missed calls. Unknown numbers. One voicemail simply said, "You didn't have to make this ugly." I opened my laptop. If Karen wanted to make this public, I was going to make it accurate. The county property database took less than 5 minutes to pull up. The original deed was exactly where I remembered it, filed in 1947. My grandfather's name. Clear boundaries. No easements, no shared access. But that wasn't enough. Karen hadn't built this kind of confidence on nothing. So I dug deeper. HOA filings, planning board minutes, archived petitions. That's when I found it. 3 years earlier, long before I ever inherited this place, Karen Morrison had filed a formal request with the county on behalf of the HOA. Petition for recreational easement. Lake access. I clicked through the scanned documents, my pulse slowing as the picture came into focus. Letters from residents claiming long-standing use. Statements about increasing property value. Karen's signature at the bottom. Then the decision. Petition denied. No legal basis for easement. Property privately owned. No history of public or shared access. The denial was dated 2 years ago. I leaned back in my chair. Karen hadn't been mistaken yesterday. She'd been lying, and she'd known it. My phone rang. Tom Daniels, my old colleague from my law days, didn't bother with pleasantries. "You sound like you've stepped in something," he said. "I think my HOA president is trying to steal my lake." Silence. Then, "Send me everything." By noon, he called back. "It gets worse," Tom said. 3 months after that denial, Karen requested $15,000 from HOA funds for lake access improvements. Told the board negotiations were ongoing. "They weren't," I said. "No," he replied. "They were dead. She just didn't tell them." A chill ran through me. That money hadn't been for the community. It had been for something else. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You embarrassed me in front of my community. Back off now or this will get unpleasant." No signature. None needed. I screenshot it and sent it to Tom. He responded instantly. "Don't reply. Save everything. She's digging her own hole." I stepped outside and walked down to the water's edge. The lake was calm, deceptively peaceful, like nothing ugly had ever happened here. Karen had spent years convincing people this place was theirs. She'd failed legally, so she'd tried socially, and now, because I existed, her lie was cracking. That evening, another notice appeared online. Emergency HOA meeting. Mandatory attendance, agenda, community property dispute. Special guest from county planning office. Karen wasn't hiding anymore. She was preparing a public execution. What she didn't realize was this. I'd spent 15 years watching confident liars collapse when the room finally saw the documents. And she had no idea how many of hers I already had. By the time I pulled into the community center parking lot, the place was already full. That alone told me Karen had done her homework. People don't usually show up to HOA meetings. They complain online, grumble to neighbors, then stay home. Tonight was different. Folding chairs spilled out of the building. Cars lined the street. I counted at least 80 people walking toward the entrance, some talking loudly, others tight-lipped and wary. Karen hadn't just called a meeting. She'd mobilized an audience. Inside, the air was thick with expectation. I slipped into a chair near the back, phone on silent but recording. At the front of the room stood Karen Morrison, posture perfect, voice warm, shaking hands like a politician before an election. Beside her was a man in a county badge and an ill-fitting blazer. That was new. Karen tapped the microphone, smiling as the room settled. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I know emotions are high. There's been a lot of misinformation floating around about our lake access, and tonight I want to clear that up, with facts." She gestured toward the man beside her. "This is David Thornton from the county planning office." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Authority had arrived. David cleared his throat. "Good evening. I've been asked to explain how easements can sometimes exist even when they aren't obvious on a deed." I felt it immediately. Carefully chosen words, broad statements, legal fog. "In some cases," David continued, "long-standing, uninterrupted community use can create what's known as an implied easement." Karen stepped back in smoothly. "Exactly. Many of you have enjoyed that lake for years. When you bought your homes, that access mattered." Heads nodded. Someone muttered, "That's why we paid more." Karen's eyes found me. "Recently," she said, "a new property owner decided to lock the gate and involve law enforcement, treating families like criminals." A few people turned to look at me. I stayed seated. She wanted reaction. I wasn't giving it yet. An older woman in the front row raised her hand. "My grandkids fish there every summer. Are you saying that can just be taken away?" Karen smiled sympathetically. "That's what we're here to prevent." Applause broke out. David shifted uncomfortably. "To be clear," he added, "these matters often require review. No determination has been made." Karen cut him off gently. "Which is why the HOA is prepared to file for an injunction to protect community access while the process plays out." That word, injunction, landed hard. People whispered. Some looked relieved, others confused. That was my opening. I stood slowly. The room quieted, not instantly, but noticeably. Karen's smile tightened. "Yes," she said. "This is a community forum." "I just have a question," I replied calmly. "For Mr. Thornton." David looked relieved to be addressed directly. "You mentioned implied easements," I said. "Are you aware of any prior petitions filed for this property?" Karen's head snapped toward him. David hesitated. I wasn't briefed on prior filings." I nodded and raised my phone, screen facing the room. "Then maybe this will help." A scanned document filled the display. County seal, official letterhead. Petition for recreational. Easement denied. The murmurs returned, louder now. "This petition," I continued, "was filed by the HOA 3 years ago. It was reviewed by the county planning board and denied. In writing, 2 years ago. Karen stepped forward sharply. That decision is irrelevant. Circumstances change. Do they? I asked. Because the denial states there is no legal basis for easement and no history of shared access. David leaned toward the screen, reading fast. His face drained of color. I wasn't aware of this, he said quietly. Karen laughed, but it came out brittle. You're cherry-picking documents to confuse people. I kept my voice steady. Then explain why the HOA told residents access negotiations were ongoing after this denial. The room shifted. A man near the aisle stood. Wait, you told us it was almost approved. Karen raised her hands. This is more complex than... And why, I continued, were HOA funds approved for lake access improvements after the county had already said no? That did it. Voices rose. Questions overlapped. Karen tried to regain control, but the room had tilted away from her. David stepped back from the microphone. I need to report this to my supervisor, he said, and slipped toward the exit. Karen watched him go. For the first time, she looked unsure. I sat back down, heart steady. I didn't need to win the room. I just needed to make it impossible for her to lie comfortably. As the meeting dissolved into argument, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. Unknown number. You just crossed a line. This doesn't end well for you. I didn't reply. I already knew something she didn't. When people start threatening instead of explaining, it's because the documents are about to surface. And I had a feeling the next ones would change everything. The first knock came at 9:07 the next morning. Not loud, not urgent, careful. The kind of knock someone uses when they don't want to be seen. When I opened the door, the woman standing there looked like she'd barely slept. Helen Martinez, 62, retired accountant, HOA, treasurer. She held a casserole dish in both hands like a peace offering. I hope this isn't inappropriate, she said quietly. But after last night, I think we need to talk. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't waste time. At my kitchen table, she set the dish down, then reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. I've handled the HOA finances for 6 years, she said. I trusted Karen. I shouldn't have. She slid the papers toward me. Bank statements, expense summaries, board approvals. At the meeting, Helen continued, when you mentioned the $15,000 for lake access, something didn't sit right. I went home and pulled the records. I scanned the numbers once. Then again, only $8,500 was accounted for. Receipts that didn't match invoices, vendors with generic names, payments approved without full board votes. Where's the rest? I asked, already knowing the answer. Helen shook her head. That's what I want to know. And it doesn't stop there. She turned another page. Over the past 2 years, Karen approved multiple administrative expenses on her own authority. Small amounts, easy to miss. When I added them up, she swallowed. 12,000 more, unaccounted for. $27,000. Gone. The lake wasn't the end game. It was the cover. I called an emergency board meeting last night, Helen said. 3 of the 5 showed up. When I presented this, they were stunned. We voted to suspend Karen's spending authority pending a full audit. That was the moment everything changed. Karen wasn't just lying to the neighborhood. She was stealing from it. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the lake as the pieces locked into place. The denied petition, the missing funds, the manufactured outrage. She'd needed the community angry at me so no one would look at the books. Helen, I said, turning back, there's more you need to see. I showed her the county denial letter, the petition, the timeline, the threatening texts. Then I pulled up the emails Tom had uncovered late the night before. A developer, a proposal, a private fishing club. Helen read silently, her face draining of color. "She told us the money was for negotiations," she whispered. "She told us the county was on board." "She lied," I said. "And she's been planning this longer than I've owned the property." Helen stood abruptly and paced the kitchen. "We trusted her," she said. "People paid dues, retirees on fixed incomes, families. She used all of us." Her voice hardened. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer immediately. Karen still thought this was about a gate, about access, about control. She didn't realize she'd crossed into criminal territory. "There's another HOA meeting in 2 weeks," I said. "That's where this ends. Not in whispers, not online, in front of everyone." Helen nodded slowly. "Then I want to be there, and I want the records presented. All of them." My phone buzzed. "Tom, she's in trouble. Bigger trouble than we thought. Call me." I excused myself and stepped outside. Tom didn't bother easing in. "She didn't just misrepresent access," he said. "She took money from an investor, $200,000, based on fabricated documents." I closed my eyes. "Forgery?" I asked. "County letterhead. Fake approval. If that comes out publicly, this stops being an HOA issue and starts being a felony investigation." I looked back through the window at Helen, still standing in my kitchen, staring at years of betrayal laid out on paper. Karen Morrison had built her authority on confidence, but confidence doesn't survive spreadsheets, and it definitely doesn't survive daylight. By the time Helen left, the plan was clear. Documents would be organized, timelines built, witnesses ready. Karen wanted a public forum. She was going to get one, and this time she wouldn't be holding the microphone. Tom didn't call anymore. He showed up. 2 banker's boxes sat on my kitchen table before I even finished pouring coffee. He loosened his tie, the way he used to before cross-examining someone who thought they were smarter than the paper trail. "It's not just bad," he said. "It's criminal." He opened the first box and laid the documents out in order, methodical, almost gentle, because what they revealed was anything but. "Karen didn't just tell the HOA she had access rights," Tom continued. "She told an investor." I felt the word land. "Investor?" Tom slid a printed email across the table. The subject line was cheerful, optimistic. "Lakeview Fishing Club. Partnership opportunity." A name sat at the bottom. "Ron Harper, CEO, Harper Leisure Group." "They specialize in private recreational developments," Tom said. "Fishing clubs, hunting preserves, high-end memberships." I scrolled. Karen's words stared back at me. "Exclusive 3.2-acre private lake. HOA-controlled access. County approval secured." My jaw tightened. "She pitched him a fully approved project," Tom said. "Told him the HOA controlled the lake, promised guaranteed access." "And he believed her," I said. "He invested," Tom corrected. $200,000, half up front." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Where is that money?" Tom didn't answer immediately. He pulled out another document, an LLC filing. Lakeview Recreation Partners. Managing member, Karen Morrison, profit share, 30%. "She set it up quietly," he said. "Off the HOA books." My hands curled into fists. "She was planning to sell memberships to my lake." "Yes," Tom said. "Projected revenue? $1 million a year. Her cut? $300,000. The room felt smaller. "Does Harper know?" I asked. Tom exhaled. "He does now." I looked up. "I contacted his attorney this morning," Tom said. "Asked him to verify the easement They pulled county records. And? And they realized the approval letter Karen provided was fake. He slid one last page toward me. County letterhead, official seal, signature, forged. My fingers trembled as I held it. That's felony document fraud, Tom said quietly. Wire fraud, embezzlement, and once Harper files suit, prosecutors will follow. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. You think you're clever. You're not. Stop now. Tom photographed the screen without a word. Add it to the file, he said. I stepped outside, needing air. The lake looked the same as always, still indifferent, reflecting the sky like nothing was wrong. That was the cruel part. Karen had built an entire scheme on something that never belonged to her, and the water didn't care. Tom joined me on the porch. There's more, he said. Harper wants to attend the next HOA meeting. I turned slowly. He wants to confront her publicly, Tom continued, with his attorney, with documentation. I pictured Karen standing at the podium, confident smile ready, then seeing him walk in. The silence after that would be deafening. My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail. Karen's voice, tightly controlled, angry beneath the surface. You're making a very big mistake. This doesn't end the way you think it does. I deleted it. Because she was right about one thing. This wasn't ending the way she thought. That afternoon, another call came in, this one unexpected. A reporter. Local paper. She'd heard about an HOA dispute involving forged documents and missing funds. I told her the truth. Come to the meeting, I said. Bring a notebook. When I hung up, Tom studied me. Once the press is involved, there's no taking this back. I nodded. Karen crossed that line years ago. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I stood by the water and thought about my grandfather. About patience. About waiting for the right moment to set the hook. Karen thought she was the smartest person in the room. In 2 weeks, she'd learn what happens when the documents arrive before the excuses. Karen didn't know she was already losing. That was the strange part. On Monday morning, she sent out another HOA-wide email. Polished, authoritative, calm on the surface. It framed the upcoming meeting as a chance to restore order and address malicious rumors. She signed it the same way she always did, with confidence that assumed obedience. What she didn't know was that her authority had already been quietly cut in half. At 10:14 a.m., Helen called me. We suspended her spending power, she said, quietly. Emergency board vote last night. I closed my eyes for a moment. Did she fight it? She tried, Helen replied. But when I laid out the missing funds, no one defended her. Not even the ones who used to. That told me more than any document could. Karen's power had never come from rules or bylaws. It came from belief. And belief was leaking fast. By noon, 2 more board members had reached out to Helen asking for copies of the financial records. By mid-afternoon, one of them emailed me directly, an apology wrapped in careful language, but sincere. We trusted her. We shouldn't have. That evening, Tom stopped by again. No boxes this time, just a thin folder and a look I recognized from courtrooms years ago. She's getting sloppy, he said. He handed me a printed screenshot. Karen had emailed the developer again. That morning, still claiming the HOA would resolve access issues internally. She's doubling down, Tom said, trying to stall him. That's desperation, I replied. Tom nodded. And desperate people make mistakes. Karen's mistake came faster than either of us expected. Tuesday afternoon, a new notice appeared, this time hand-delivered. Mandatory HOA meeting, attendance required, failure to attend. May result in fines. Karen had never used that language before. She was forcing turnout, forcing loyalty, trying to overwhelm truth with numbers. But numbers don't work when they start asking questions. That night, I got another text from her. Last warning. Walk away, and this goes quiet. I stared at the screen for a long moment before forwarding it to Tom. Add it to the timeline. He replied with one word, done. The next morning, Helen came by again. No casserole this time, just a manila envelope and a tired expression. I shouldn't be doing this, she said, but I can't unsee what I found. Inside were internal emails. Karen pressuring board members, dismissing concerns, telling them not to request documentation because it would confuse residents. She told us transparency would hurt property values, Helen said. I believed her. That's how control works, I replied quietly. You convince people questions are dangerous. Helen swallowed. I won't protect her anymore. Neither would anyone else. By Wednesday, the rumor mill had turned on Karen. Not loudly, not publicly, but in whispers. People compared notes. Old conversations resurfaced. Stories that never quite made sense before suddenly did. Why she always controlled communication. Why she discouraged independent verification. Why she reacted so aggressively to challenges. By Thursday morning, the reporter called again. Something big is coming, she said. People are talking. Yes, I replied. They are. That evening, Tom confirmed what we'd been waiting for. Harper is flying in, he said, with counsel. I exhaled slowly. Good. The board couldn't ignore an investor with forged documents. The community couldn't ignore missing money, and Karen couldn't intimidate everyone at once. That night, I stood by the gate and looked at the new sign I'd installed days earlier. Private property, no trespassing, simple, honest. Everything Karen's story wasn't. She thought this meeting would be her courtroom, her stage, her redemption. But she didn't realize something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't walking into a room full of followers anymore. She was walking into witnesses. And once witnesses start comparing notes, confidence stops mattering. By the time I arrived, the parking lot was overflowing. Cars lined both sides of the street. People stood in clusters under the streetlights, voices low, expressions tight. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was anxiety. Inside the community center, every chair was filled. Late arrivals leaned against the walls. Someone had brought a portable fan that hummed uselessly against the heat of too many bodies in one room. Karen had wanted turnout. She got it. She arrived at 6:22 p.m. Not alone. Two people flanked her as she walked in. One woman in a tailored suit carrying a briefcase, the other a man with slicked back hair and the kind of posture meant to intimidate. Legal backup. Visual reinforcement. Karen scanned the room, smile fixed, then froze for half a second. She'd seen the projector, the banker boxes, the unfamiliar man seated calmly in the third row beside an attorney. Ron Harper had arrived. Karen recovered quickly. She always did. She moved to the front, tapped the microphone, and waited for the room to quiet. It didn't. The usual polite applause never came. Instead, there was only the low murmur of people waiting to see what she'd say. Good evening, Karen began, voice tight. I'm glad so many of you could attend. Before we begin, I want to address some malicious accusations that have been circulating. Helen stood. I'm invoking my authority as treasurer, she said, voice steady. This meeting will begin with a special presentation regarding financial discrepancies and misrepresentation. Karen's head snapped toward her. You don't have that authority. she said sharply. I do, Helen replied. By board vote, 3-2. That was the moment Karen realized she didn't control the room anymore. Her attorney leaned in and whispered something urgent. Karen nodded once, then stepped back. Fine, she said. Let's get this over with. I stood and walked to the front. The room went silent. My name is Michael, I said calmly. 3 weeks ago, I inherited property that includes the lake behind my home. Since then, I've been accused of stealing something that was never owned by this HOA. I clicked the first slide. A deed. Clear boundaries. No easements. Murmurs rippled. I didn't rush. I let the documents speak. The petition Karen filed. The county's denial. The HOA funds approved after that denial. Karen shifted behind me. Then I brought up the emails. Karen's words. Promises of guaranteed access. Projected profits. The name Ron Harper appeared on the screen. Ron stood. My company invested $200,000 based on documents Ms. Morrison provided, he said. Those documents were fabricated. Gasps. Chairs scraped. Karen's lawyer stood abruptly. My client denies these allegations. I clicked again. The forged county approval letter filled the screen. Ron continued. The county confirmed this approval never existed. I'm pursuing civil and criminal action. Karen's face had gone pale. Then Helen stepped forward with the financial records. $15,000 approved for lake access, she said. Only $8,500 accounted for. An additional $12,000 diverted through unauthorized expenditures. She held up the statements. This is theft. Karen finally found her voice. This is a coordinated attack, she snapped. He wants your lake, your amenities, your property values. I turned to face her. I wanted peace and quiet, I said evenly. You wanted profit. The room erupted. Questions flew, accusations, demands. Did you lie to us? Where's our money? Did you forge government documents? Karen tried to speak. No one listened. Her attorney stepped forward. My client will not answer further questions. Karen grabbed her purse and moved toward the exit. No one stopped her. That was the cruelest part. She wasn't powerful enough anymore to be confronted, only watched. As the doors closed behind her, the room stood in stunned silence. People looked at one another, realizing they'd trusted the wrong person. The reporter in the back row scribbled furiously. Tom leaned toward me and whispered, The DA already has copies. I exhaled slowly. Outside, the night air was cool. Karen had come prepared to defend herself. She hadn't come prepared to be exposed. And once applause stops, authority collapses fast. The first call came the next morning. Not from the HOA, not from Karen, from the county. Tom was already on the line when I answered. They opened a formal investigation, he said. Fraud, forgery, embezzlement. And they're moving faster than I expected. I looked out at the lake as he spoke. Same water, same silence. But everything around it had changed. By noon, the story was online. HOA president accused of forging county documents, misusing funds. Karen's name was in the headline. Not as president, as defendant. My phone didn't stop ringing. Neighbors who had avoided eye contact days earlier now wanted to talk, apologize, explain. Some sounded embarrassed, others angry, not at me, but at themselves. We trusted her, one man said. She spoke so confidently. Confidence is cheap. Paper isn't. That afternoon, Helen called again. The board held an emergency vote, she said. Karen's been removed as president, effective immediately. She's also barred from holding any HOA position pending the outcome of the investigation. I closed my eyes for a moment. Power doesn't usually disappear with noise. It disappears with paperwork. By evening, Ron Harper's lawsuit was filed. Civil court, full amount plus damages. His attorney didn't mince words when he spoke to the press. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a calculated fraud. Karen's attorney released a brief statement claiming she acted in good faith based on information she believed to be accurate. No one believed it. Because the county released their own statement an hour later. The approval letter was forged. The signature was fake, and the email trail was unmistakable. 2 days after the meeting, Karen didn't show up for her scheduled interview with investigators. That's when things escalated. A warrant was issued, quietly. No cameras, no spectacle, just procedure. They found her at home that evening. I didn't see it happen, but I heard about it from 3 different neighbors within the hour. Squad car, flashing lights. The same street she'd once walked with absolute authority now watched in silence as she was escorted out. Handcuffs have a way of humbling people who used to hold clipboards. By the weekend, the HOA was in damage control mode. Emails went out promising transparency. A forensic audit was announced. Refunds were discussed. Trust, once broken, suddenly became everyone's favorite word. Helen stopped by one last time. "I should have questioned her sooner," she said quietly. "I won't make that mistake again." "No one expects betrayal from someone they see every week," I replied. "That's how it works." She nodded, then hesitated. "There's talk," she said, "about whether you'd consider some kind of limited access arrangement, on your terms, legally." I looked past her toward the water. "Maybe," I said, "someday, when this settles." Because this wasn't over yet. Karen's arrest wasn't the end. It was the beginning of consequences. Plea negotiations started almost immediately. The DA had leverage, multiple charges, clear intent, paper trails that couldn't be explained away. By midweek, Tom confirmed it. "She's looking at prison time if this goes to trial," he said. "They're pushing for a plea." That night, I walked down to the lake alone. I thought about my grandfather, about the years he worked 2 jobs to buy this land, about how easily someone had almost turned it into a commodity with a forged letter and a smile. Karen had believed authority protected her. It hadn't. Truth doesn't need volume. It needs time. And now the community was learning something uncomfortable. The villain hadn't come from outside. She'd been elected. The plea deal came faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks after the meeting, Karen Morrison stood in a courtroom instead of a community center. No clipboard, no microphone, no one applauding her entrance. She pleaded guilty to multiple counts: document forgery, wire fraud, embezzlement. The judge didn't raise his voice when he spoke. He didn't need to. "You abused a position of trust," he said. "Not once, repeatedly, over years." Karen stared straight ahead. She was sentenced to prison time, ordered to repay the stolen HOA funds, and permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in the state. When the gavel fell, there was no satisfaction, only a quiet sense of finality. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked me how I felt. I chose my words carefully. "This wasn't about revenge," I said. "It was about stopping something that shouldn't have been happening." That answer followed me home. The HOA went into full reconstruction mode. New bylaws, financial oversight, mandatory audits, transparency clauses that should have existed from the beginning. People who once defended Karen now apologized openly. "I didn't want to rock the boat," one neighbor admitted. "I thought asking questions would make things worse." That was the lesson. Silence doesn't keep peace. It protects power. One evening, the board invited me to attend a meeting, not as an enemy, but as a threat, but as a neighbor. Helen had been elected interim president. She looked tired but resolute. "We'd like to formally apologize," she said to the room, "and to ask, without pressure, if you'd consider any future arrangement regarding the lake." Everyone waited. I stood and looked around. "This land has been in my family for generations," I said. "It was never meant to be a bargaining chip or a business opportunity." I paused, but it was also never meant to be a weapon. I proposed something simple: limited, written access, clear rules, no fees, no profit, no assumptions, and the right to revoke it if boundaries weren't respected. The room agreed unanimously, not because they were entitled, because they finally understood they weren't. That night I walked the shoreline one last time before heading home. Karen had lost everything trying to control something she didn't own. The community had lost something too, its innocence, but it had gained something better: accountability. And that's when I realized justice isn't loud. It's quiet, procedural, and permanent. A month after everything ended, the lake looked the same as it always had. Still, clear, unbothered by what humans tried to turn it into. My nephew came to visit that spring, 12 years old, all energy and questions. He stood at the water's edge with a fishing rod that was almost too big for him, tongue clenched between his teeth as he tried to cast the way my grandfather once taught me. "Uncle," he said, watching the line settle, "Mom said people tried to take this place from you." I reeled in slowly, thinking about how to explain something that took courts and years to unravel. "They tried to convince everyone it belonged to them," I said, "even themselves." He frowned. "Why didn't they just ask?" I smiled at that. That's the difference between ownership and entitlement. We fished in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels earned. Karen's sentencing made the paper again that week. Short article, no photo, the kind of ending that doesn't feel dramatic, just deserved. The HOA finished its forensic audit. Money was recovered. Systems were rebuilt. New leadership came with rules that made abuse harder and truth easier. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I pulled something from my pocket. An old key. Steel, worn smooth by decades of use. "My grandfather installed that gate in the 1960s, I told my nephew. "He saved for this land working 2 jobs. He believed that if you take care of what's yours, it will take care of you." I placed the key in his hand. "Someday," I said, "this will be yours. And when people try to take what doesn't belong to them, you don't shout. You don't threaten. You don't panic." He closed his fingers around it. "You stand still," I continued. "You gather the truth, and you let it do the work." He nodded, serious in a way only kids can be when they sense something important. As we walked back toward the house, we passed the sign at the gate. Brennan Family Lake. Established 1947. Private property. Simple. Honest. Unarguable. That night I sat on the porch watching the water reflect the stars. The same water Karen once believed could be turned into a business with confidence and forged paper. She'd been wrong. Not because she wasn't loud enough, but because truth doesn't care how loud you are. It waits. And when it surfaces, it stays. If you've ever been pressured, threatened, or made to feel small by people in power, especially in an HOA, you're not alone. Share your experience in the comments. Someone else needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories where authority meets accountability, because silence protects abuse, but truth protects people.